Hey there, everybody. PTPOP here on a mind revolution, where I lead you out of the rabbit hole, one grain of truth at a time. Thanks for tuning in today. And today I'm going to dissect the world of art, music, and culture with the hot topic: why were the Beatles considered to be geniuses? Stay tuned.
Would you like fries with that? Would you like fries with that?
So, thanks for tuning in today, everybody, and thanks for watching. Or if you're listening to my podcast, I appreciate you listening on the podcast as well. Today I'm coming to you as an avid Beatles fan, a one-time rabid Beatlemaniac, and the topic leads me to ask the question: how do we define genius, and how do we get to the point where songs like "Love Me Do," one of the Beatles' simplest songs, is considered genius alongside Mozart and Beethoven? Now, I know the two styles of music are completely and entirely different, but the ties that bind those artists is the word genius. So let's take a closer look at Love Me Do and ask the crucial question: how did a song so simple and saccharine sweet catch the ear of legendary EMI producer George Martin? Now let's start off. If you're not familiar with the song, I can't play too much of it. I'll play it on my guitar. Otherwise, I'll get a right. But the song is just a very simple song. It's got 3 chords in it. And it goes something like this. Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do. All right, so there you have it. But let's take a closer look at the song now. Love Me Do. This is a simple song that started it all for the Beatles. Structurally, it's incredibly basic. Just one verse and a chorus. I mean, this is what I love about the song. Love, love me do. You know I love you. This is the first verse. Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do. Now the second verse, I just love. This is the best part of the song, the second verse. It goes like this. Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do. Whoa, love me do. Isn't that great? I love the second verse. And then it breaks off into a bridge. Someone to love, somebody new. Someone to love, someone like you. And then the third verse is genius. The third verse is pure genius. Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do. Whoa, love me do. And it's just, and I forgot the fourth verse is even better than the second and the third. Fourth verse is love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do. Whoa, love me do. And structurally, this is an incredibly basic song. Just one verse repeated throughout the song and a chorus or a bridge, whatever you want to call it. It's repeated over and over and over. And musically, it's built around 3 simple chords, a G, C, and a D. The melody, catchy but repetitive in the lyrics. Love me do, you know I love you. It doesn't exactly scream poetic brilliance. Now, if you go to their days, their first time they came into EMI studios in London to audition for EMI, their audition took place on Wednesday, June 6, 1962, in Studio 2 in EMI Studios, in Abbey Road Studios. Producer George Martin, Ron Richards, engineer Norman Smith. And the session, I'm reading this from Beatles Bible, and this is titled Recording Besame Mucho, Love Me Do, P.S. I Love You, Ask Me Why. the Beatles' first Abbey Road recording session. And it says here the session took place in Studio 2 from 7 to 10 p.m., 3 hours to record 1, 2, 3, 4 songs. 4 hours is an hour per song. From 7, it's from 7 to 10, that's 3 hours. So that's 4 songs, so maybe 40 minutes per song. The Beatles first ran through a number of songs and then recorded 4. So I guess they did a brief run through, which is fairly typical. And then they recorded 4. So the precise number of takes are unknown, but they were taped in the following order. Bésame Mucho, which is not their song, it's somebody else's song. Love Me Do, which is their song. P.S. I Love You, and Ask Me Why. Now, the Beatles didn't make a very good impression. Now, this is a quote from Norman Smith. Norman Smith was the engineer on hand that day. He says, the Beatles didn't make a very good impression apart from visually. We heard nothing of John and Paul's songwriting ability. They had tiny little Vox amplifiers and speakers, which didn't create much of a sound at source. Of course, every sound engineer wants some kind of sound at source that he can then embellish and improve upon, but I got nothing out of the Beatles' equipment except for a loud noise, hum, and goodness knows what. Paul's was about the worst. In those days, we had echo chambers to add on to reverberation. I can't say reverberation. And I had to raid Studio 2 echo chamber in order to fix him up with a second so that we could get something done on tape. So Paul's bass amp was such garbage that they couldn't even use it. They had to rig something together from an amp speakers they ripped out of a reverberation chamber. And Norman goes on to say that Paul's amp wasn't the only problem during the session. He says we actually had to tie string around John Lennon's guitar amplifier to stop it from rattling. There were also problems with Pete Best's drums, his cymbals, I believe. But we eventually got everything sorted out, and finally we started to record. They recorded the only recordings of Bésame Mucho and Love Me Do survive today. The other 2 songs don't exist. After the session, the other recordings were destroyed. It says here, after it was decided that nothing from the session could be commercially released. I beg to ask you why this dull and mundane song caught the ear of Mr. George Martin. So Love Me Do becomes their first hit. It goes to number 17 on the charts in the United Kingdom. And it really is fascinating to think such a simplistic song launched a band that would go to redefine popular music. Which begs me to ask the question, what do we really consider good music anymore, and what is genius? I mean, if you compare Love Me Do to the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, the only thing they have in comparison is somebody somewhere to decide to call the different entities geniuses. Mozart's music is complex, dynamic. The opening movement of many of his songs features multiple melodic themes, harmonic layers, and a clear sense of development. And Beethoven? I mean, Beethoven is a guy who composed some of his best work when he was practically deaf. And he built an entire symphony around so many different themes. So what I'm getting at is, there's the watering down of the word genius. And when we call Love Me Do genius, are we watering down the meaning of the word? I mean, Mozart and Beethoven weren't just creating songs, they were transforming music. Their works are studied centuries later because of their complexity, innovation, and emotional depth. Love Me Do, it's a nice pop tune, but it's not revolutionary. It's the music equivalent of a doodle compared to Michelangelo fresco. It's really nothing. This is a song, in my opinion, as a one-time rabid Beatles fan, that if this song was shot up in the outer space, every copy of it in the world was destroyed and shot up into space, I wouldn't miss it for a second. The world would be a better place without it. So the Beatles would go on to write masterpieces like A Day in the Life, Eleanor Rigby, but Love Me Do it isn't one of them. It's a starting point, a glimpse, I guess, at their potential, not a showcase of genius. So why do we equate cultural impact with musical genius? Have we stretched the definition to fit simpler, more accessible works? I mean, consider this. I mean, a lot of the Beatles songs are they're junky. Love Me Do, Yellow Submarine. To this day, people will sit there and say, "Oh my God, that's genius! I grew up in this song. Oh, it brings back such good memories." But because it makes you feel good, does that make a genius? So let's start and ask ourselves, what is the definition of a genius? Okay. Now, the standard definition of a genius varies, depends on the context, but the core idea centers around extraordinarily high intellectual or creative ability. And the key definition, the basic dictionary definition, Merriam-Webster dictionary, it's exceptional intellectual or creative power or natural ability, a person who exhibits extraordinary skill or talent in a particular area. In the Oxford English Dictionary, exceptional intellectual or creative ability, a person regarded as having exceptional creative or intellectual power. They just keep saying the same thing over again. Exceptional abilities, originality, impact, innate talent. They're born into them, it's in their genetics. High IQ threshold, cultural evolution of the term has changed over the years. But the key question is, genius an inherent trait, or does it depend on the impact of the recognition of one's work? This is part of the ongoing debate around the term. See, so I I have a very hard time with this song, "Love Me Do." This is a Beatles song. This is one of my least favorite Beatles songs. And as I've gotten older and I've heard all their songs a million times over, I got to sit back and say, wait a minute, some big producer at EMI Records, the biggest record label in all of England, said, boys, bring that song Love Me Do in again. I think I'll like that one. We'll make that your first hit. And it's a dull and insipid song. And what makes even less sense is, how do they go from love me do, ba-da, 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 I love you, ba-da, 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 so please love to. Last night I said these words to my girl. You know you never even try, girl. Ba-da. I mean, it's a completely different style of songwriting. It's completely different wording. It's completely different phrasing. It's completely different rhyming. It's completely different tempo. It's a completely different style. How'd they go from this plodding along basic elementary song to boom, boom, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm leaving this up in the air here because I just don't believe the official Beatles narrative. I mean, you can't begin to tell me that they walked into EMI Studios and wasted George Martin's time with "Ask Me Why," "Besame Mucho," and "Like Dreamers Do" and "Love Me Do." Have you ever heard "Like Dreamers Do"? It's terrible. This is a terrible song that is nothing better than some of the early stuff that I wrote. I saw a girl in my dreams, and so it seems that I will love her. This is how bizarre it gets with the Beatles. Okay, they write this insipid little song, "Love Me Do," with one verse and one chorus or one bridge. That's all it is, and they just repeat it over and over and over again, and there's a harmonica. All right, okay, so it's got a catchy melody and some nice harmony. That went to number 17 in October of 1962. And they allegedly had written a few songs. Then all of a sudden, October, November, December, January. By January 23rd, they had a number one hit with "Please Please Me." Now, I think this might have been, well, it says officially peaked at number 2, but I don't know if these are US charts. I think in the UK it peaked at number 1. But just think of that. They went from 17 to 2 or to 1 within just a matter of weeks. And then in the spring of 63, they had their first, I don't know if this chart is from officialcharts.com, but between October 62 and April of 1963, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, in just 6 months, they had 2 number one songs and one at number 17, From Me to You and Please Please Me. Where did they come up with Please Please Me? This is a complete change, a complete diversion from anything that they had done before that. And, a person that just doesn't believe the official story. But honestly, within a year, between October and December, they had 1, 2, 3, 4 number one hits. It's insane. All from Love Me Do. But the basic message here today is that song indicative of a genius. If you walked into a studio with a song like that today, let's say there never was a Beatles before that, you walk into a studio today with a song like that, and people would laugh at you. They would have laughed at you back then. If you walked into an American studio, if you walked into Capitol Records with Love Me Do, you know I love you, I'll always be true, so please love me do. Capitol being like, security, please, could you get these fine young lads out of here, please? Love Me Do, it feels like a sketch. It feels like a placeholder or for something greater. It just feels like a sketch. It's just like the crap I make here. One verse and a chorus, that's a hit. Here's the thing, when we call Love Me Do genius, we're watering down the meaning of the word. Mozart and Beethoven weren't just creating songs, they were transforming music. Their works are studied centuries later because of their complexity, innovation, and emotional depth. Love Me Do? It's a nice pop tune, but it's not revolutionary. It's the musical equivalent of a doodle compared to, to a Michelangelo fresco. Let's take a look at Mozart compared to the Beatles. Now, we know the breadth of the Beatles' work. I think between Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and Starr, I think they wrote something like, I think it was like 600 songs in the short 7 years they were together, 8 years they were together. But think of, these were 2 to 3 minute ditties where they had a producer telling them how to do it, how to put it together, how to arrange it. They had studio musicians working with them. They had Eric Clapton coming in on the White Album. They were half baked on pot and acid, booze, uppers, anything they could get their hands on to numb themselves of the pain of fame. And some of the songs, like Revolution Number 9, it's genius. I'm sorry, that's a genius thing. Now, Mozart was a prolific composer. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart lived from 1756 until 1791. He created over 600 works in his short lifetime. And he covered nearly every genre in his time. His compositions include 41 symphonies, 20 operas, 27 piano concertos, chamber music including string quartets, quintets, and sonatas, 18 piano sonatas, sacred music like his famous Requiem Mass, which is unfinished. Ludwig van Beethoven, 1770 to 1827. His output includes 722 works. This is according to Beethoven, a work Verzeichnis, or BWV catalog. Forgive me, those of you in Germany that are watching. I don't speak any German too good. He penned 9 symphonies, including the iconic Symphony Number 9, Ode to Joy, not to be confused with Revolution Number 9, Ode to Crapola. 5 piano concertos and a violin concerto, 32 piano sonatas, including the famous Moonlight Sonata and Appassionata, 16 string quartets, other chamber works, 1 opera, Fidelio, and sacred works like Missa Solemnis, Solemnis. Again, forgive the mispronunciations. Now, while both composers were incredibly productive, Mozart's sheer output in a shorter lifespan is remarkable, while Beethoven's work is notable for its depth, innovation, and complexity. I mean, Beethoven and Mozart haven't walked Earth for hundreds of years, and they're still well known for what they did, especially Beethoven, who created some of his best work while he was practically deaf. This man knew music so well, he could hear the music in his head, and he could write it out on the staff and bars, and knew what it would sound like. He didn't need to hear it completely. I don't know how deaf he was. I've heard he was completely deaf, and I've also heard he was like 3/4 of the way there. Now, compare that to Lennon and McCartney, Harrison and Starr. I think they're throwing the word genius around a bit too much. Now, I know it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, or it's at the very least, comparing red apples to green apples. Because, they were musicians, but, I don't even understand. And keep in mind, I'm not a classically trained musician, and I'm not a fan of classical music, and I'm not a fan of Mozart or Beethoven or any classical composer. But I find it hard to really say the Beatles were geniuses now that I'm older and I've been a musician and I've worked in the business at my own little microscopic end, and I know how hard it is to write a song. You just don't pick up the guitar after a long day of gigging and sit down in your mom's front parlor and knock off songs like "Please Please Me," "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and "She Loves You." We just tossed them off, My father said, well, it should be "She loves you, yes, yes, yes." And I said, oh, no, mother, no, father. It should be, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cooler. That's what we said to my father, Whoop-de-doo. And they make us like, well, we were just sitting back drinking a beer, smoking some ciggies, and we toss these off out in the garden, We're geniuses here. George Harrison he's lauded as being this really famous lead guitar player. But he really doesn't have any great guitar licks in some of the songs as solos. The solo in "A Hard Day's Night," I think it still gives me shivers when I hear it. But I found out all these years later that he's not playing it. And if he is, they played it really slow. And then they sped it up on the tape machine because he couldn't play it at the right tempo, because he wasn't skilled enough to play it. So they've also got a piano playing the same notes in the backgrounds. You got a piano playing right along with it. And they double track it to give it a thicker sound and a heavier sound, make it more exciting. Well, George isn't even playing that. I don't think he's playing it. I don't even know if he played it and they sped it up. But whatever it is, he couldn't play it. He's having a horrible time playing it. But he's a genius. He's a genius guitarist that couldn't play the lead guitar. And some of the lead guitar work I've heard him playing, some of the early stuff, it's like kind of, it's sloppy. It's not tight. It's kind of like, and people are like, oh, that's the beauty of it. It's so loose, and he bends these notes, and he's, it's like, okay, he's a genius. He's a genius. All right. I just don't understand. They get these four guys. They're all, for the first time in the history of mankind, in the history of music, they somehow, the stars and the moon aligned, and the gods brought down 5 geniuses into Abbey Road 2, number 2 studio, and had them create allegedly the greatest pop music and love songs in the history of music and mankind. Do you know that is just too coincidental, isn't it? Like, they're all geniuses. Oh, we're just geniuses. I'm sorry. John Lennon runs around before he's dying saying, I was a freaking genius, I was a genius. And nobody saw it. I'm like, what do I have to do to see real genius? I'm a genius. Who walks around thinking they're a genius? Well, how did he say it? I'm a fucking genius, That's all there is to it. I was a genius. No one could see it. My teachers couldn't see it. The audacity, the You have to be so wrapped up in yourself to think you're a genius just because he could draw these crappy little pictures and write this jabberwocky gibberish. And I'm just beyond stunned. And what I think has happened, and what I think happened, is they got these four guys in a room, and he said, "Look, boys, you've got an interesting charisma here, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to write some songs for you, and we're going to toss it off and make it sound as if you wrote them all." I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. None of us know. But somehow, George Martin, George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr were lauded as being four geniuses that could do no wrong, and everything they touched turned to gold. And even to this day, years and years after their breakup as a band, they're lauding this band as being genius for everything they do, everything they did. The two remaining Beatles, or it might be the one remaining Beatle and Billy. You know, they release a book. Ringo releases a book of photography that he took back in the 60s when they were on tour. And it's like, oh, it's genius. Oh, it's a picture of fans screaming at the limousine window. Oh, it's genius. It's Ringo. It must be genius. Paul McCartney releases a book of his paintings. They're crap. They're complete crap. Oh, no, Pete, that's genius. That's Paul McCartney at work, and what he does is genius. You know, and some of the George Harrison stuff that came out in All Things Must Pass, that album is being lauded as being one of the greatest albums of all time. And All Things Must Pass, that song, it plods along. All things must pass. And it's just the same chords up and down the fret. E to like F sharp minor 7 to something. And away. All things must pass. Oh, it's genius. Sorry, Pete. Stop. That is genius. I don't care what you say. And it goes on and on and on. And they keep repackaging this junk, remastering it, remixing it over and over and over again. I mean, how many different versions do we need to hear? How many times do we need to hear the mono version of Day Tripper versus the stereo version versus the remastered mono version versus the remastered stereo version versus the individual tracks that were released, by some schmuck with the software to do it. You know, I just don't get it anymore. Why do we need this constantly being shoved down our throat? The genius of their bass playing, the genius of their drumming, the genius of their songwriting. And I think we throw the word genius around like it's going out of style. We throw it around like it's, hey. It's like if a guy takes a crap on a canvas and sticks a Cheerio in his poop and hangs it on the wall, people are like, oh my God. Why didn't I think of that? That's genius. Poop on a canvas with Cheerio. Right. Oh my God, I never thought of that. And it is that bad now in the art community. You should see some of the crap that's hanging on the gallery walls around here in Cleveland or in any city. But the point is, I guess the Beatles were geniuses. I guess so. I guess they had no help. Nobody came in the studio and said, hey, why don't you try drumming like this? Or, hey, let's bring this drummer in and have Ringo sit in the corner. They did it with Alan White and a few other people play on the drums, allegedly just in the first couple recordings. Because Ringo wasn't a very good drummer. And he's not. I guess he's steady. I guess. I don't know. But he's not competent enough to do complex fills. And he'll say, well, I didn't do a lot of fills. I don't think there's a need for fills, really. I just play straight on. That's all I do. I'm a left-handed drummer that plays in a right-handed kit. So, that's just what I do. Come on, guys. I've seen guys in bar bands that would blow Ringo Starr off the stage. Ringo Starr is a genius because he's a Beatle. John Lennon is a genius because he's a Beatle. Same with Paul McCartney, the same with George Harrison. They were lauded as being and marketed as being geniuses because of who they are. And I'm tired of it. So it's just, This song "Love Me Do" drives me crazy, and if they took every copy of it in the world and shot it off into the sun and nobody could ever hear it again, it would be a better place as far as I'm concerned. All right, I'm PTPOP. If you like this video, give me the thumbs up. Laud me as being a genius. Subscribe. Tell your friends about it. But think about it. Are they really geniuses? Hasta la vista, baby.
Would you like fries with that? Would you like fries with that?